Have you ever wondered what it means to restart your career after a break? Or you're eager to figure out how to reach your full potential? Maybe you're wondering the many ways to enhance your attention to detail. Or what about what it means to leave a legacy? These are some of the topics we will be discussing in today's episode, so stay tuned. And this is Molo Molo African Tech Stories. Hello and welcome to Molo Molo African Tech Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Paulin Kantwe, and together we'll be discovering the amazing tech champions and innovators that are shaping the future of the African continent. Now, as you can see, I am wearing the Cameroonian football shirt, the Indomitable Lions, as we say in French, the Lions Indomptables. And this is an exciting time because we are in the middle of AFCON. AFCON currently is being tackled out and battled on the streets and the stadiums of Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. And this is an exciting episode because we are for sure in the midst of something that's quite relevant, but also quite important for us as Africans to not only be proud of, but also to just relish and really let our guard down and really come arm in arm and shoulder to shoulder as Africans and just celebrate our uniqueness, but more importantly, celebrate our ability to battle out on the technical field of the sport we all love, which is football. Today's episode is indeed a very a famous tech champion. He is one of the incredible stories that, in my view, has shaped my belief, has shaped my confidence, passed down from parent to child, and I'm passing the same type of confidence from me to my son. And this is the backdrop of today. And of course, speaking of AFCON, I mean, unfortunately the Indomitable Lions got kicked out of the last eight. And but yet there are incredible stories, right? Incredible stories during this AFCON. If I were to think about the AFCON of 10, 20 years ago, it is completely different today. It is absolutely pound for pound. Every single match is an amazing showcase of talent, technique, tactics, positioning, goals, saves, defending prowess, attacking prowess, midfield passes. Not only from the expected giants, but we got the teams like Guinea, Cape Verde, South Africa reminiscing the days of '96, and we've got teams like Equatorial Guinea, who currently I think the top goal scorer of the AFCON comes from Equatorial Guinea. We've got teams, giants being sculpted, Senegal, Cameroon, Morocco, Egypt, and the minnows, or the so-called minnows, are doing an amazing representation of what African football is all about. Flair, celebration after the goal, amazing emotions of disappointment, of absolutely elation. That is AFCON, and that is what we've come to love. The AFCON that clearly has shown that it can produce the top talent. The AFCON that clearly shows that the top talent all around the world want to represent their country, irrespective of where it's been played. They want to wear that shirt, the shirt that says, I am truly African. I am truly excited to be representing my country. And that is something that is worth being proud of. But more importantly, it's worth celebrating. So, having said that, since our last episode, if you haven't watched it, it was on Jerry Rawlings, and we really, in a way, got to expose a side that of Jerry Rawlings that wasn't really exposed before. We managed to look into his life as a pilot, really introspect and retrospect on what it means to be a pilot, what it means to really learn how to fly, more importantly, figure out what it means to shed your fears and hopefully attain your full potential through the gift, in my view, the gift of flying. But today's episode is a very close to my heart. Um, Actually, to be fair, all episodes are very close to my heart, but this is more so. Now, just to give a bit of backdrop, prior to this episode, I was really hoping to have my first co-host or guest in a way for this episode. I was kind of hoping to kind of have my dad being part of this episode, mainly because of the things that he has shown me, that this episode will be very relevant on. But I think in a way, just also showing how much technology we are able to connect. We had a few hiccups, but I believe next time we will make it happen. So I'm still excited about having guests on board and fundamentally have a more constructive, interactive conversation with someone who's able to give context on the story, or they themselves are the story that they can delve into more detail. So let's try and put some context. As we normally do, we give ourselves a bit of context so we can get right into what this episode is all about. In the 1980s and 1990s, Cameroon's football training facilities were characterized by a mix of challenges and progress. While the country had a rich footballing culture and produced talented players, the infrastructure and facilities for training were often inadequate. Many training grounds lack proper maintenance, with uneven pitches and limited access to modern equipment and amenities. Despite these challenges, Cameroon managed to nurture football talent through grassroots programs and academies, relying on the dedication and resourcefulness of coaches and players. The lack of investment in infrastructure was partially offset by the resilience and determination of the Cameroon community, which often made do with whatever resources were available. As the popularity of football grew in Cameroon and the sport became a source of national pride, there were gradual improvement in training facilities, particularly in urban areas and within elite football clubs. Wow, that is really the backdrop. The backdrop, which is in a way not a surprising backdrop when it comes to football or sports in African countries. It is still very something that's very sore when we think about it. When we are, I mean, here I am in Germany, and I see just how many choices the children have in terms of facilities, and you can go from basketball courts that are completely open to the public at a stone throw in a way. I mean, we are. I'm not even in Munich downtown, right? I'm in a little town called Kirching, where fundamentally we could say it's already a bit of a rural town, and there's two, three basketball courts, public, available for everyone. There's football pitches pretty much everywhere. There is, if you want to play table tennis, next to the basketball court, there's a table tennis. If you want to play if you want to have open fields where you just want to learn how to do different things, there is. And yet that's not the case in Africa. And I can say that having lived in South Africa, which one can call a developing and not underdeveloped, but developing country, where fundamentally there is a slightly different level of poverty in a sense that it's a bit more privileged, but that is still, as the context of the story tells us, it's still very much around the urban areas. Rural areas, either is a sharp drop when it comes to facilities. Children are completely and utterly left to their demise when it comes to playing on the streets, playing in dirty soccer grounds. I've tried to play. When I was smaller, I remember going back to Cameroon when I was about 8, and having to play with the kids, coming from Italy and going down to Cameroon. And it was just shocking to me just to see. It was such a culture shock. Children were happy, playing, competitive, but man, the ground was stony. It was full of dust, and you were breathing dust all the time. And I remember coming home coughing, back to my mom's like, oh, I'm just coughing. And yet that was the condition, that was the norm, that was accepted, that was almost a rite of passage, that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And that was in the 1980s, and that hasn't changed too much today. Of course, technology has improved in so many ways, but yet the inequality, you can see it still very starkly obvious between rural areas and urban areas. That is the backdrop of 1980s Cameroon. Today's champion, his name is Roger Milla. Obviously, as we say in French, Roger Milla. And that is the focus of today. Now, some of you may not even know who this is. I pity you. I really, really do. Because this name is synonymous around the world. If you know anything about football, if you've watched any football, if you've watched FIFA, which is fundamentally the epicenter of all our dreams, and we stay up late at night or early in the morning. I remember watching the games for Qatar 2022, right? In Germany, these games were late at night, if not early in the morning. But if you know anything about football, you would know the name Roger Miller. But there's a very important story, which is roughly in the 1980s, late 1980s, that very few people, including Cameroonians, know about the story of Roger Miller. And this is, and in the context of tech, it's very important that we get to understand who this person is, what can we learn from him, but more importantly, how he has left a legacy that we should be all aware of as Africans. So let me read a biography. Roger Milla, the legendary Cameroonian footballer, rose to prominence through a career defined by talent, resilience, and remarkable achievement. Born on May 20th, 1952, Miller's journey to football stardom began in his homeland, where he honed his skills on the streets of Yaoundé. He gained attention playing for football clubs before earning a move to France to pursue a professional career. Miller's international breakthrough, however, came in the 1980s, representing Cameroon's national team, the indomitable Lions, les Lions indomptables. In 1988, at age 36, Roger Milla retired from international football, celebrated in Cameroon. However, President Paul Biya convinced him to return for the 1990 World Cup. Biya was impressed by Milla's performance in a charity match where he had already retired, urged for his comeback. Despite reluctance from teammates and coach Valery Nepomniatsky, Biya issued a decree mandating Milla's inclusion. This decision followed public pressure after Cameroon's poor showing in the 1990 African Cup of Nations, which was slightly a few months before the World Cup. Milla officially announced his return in May 1990 and became a sensation at the World Cup in Italy. At the age of 38, Milla became the tournament's oldest goal scorer and won the Brown's Boot, which is the third best place, for his 4 goals. Beyond his on-field achievement, Miller's iconic goal celebration, including his trademark hip-shaking dance, endeared him to football fans worldwide. His impact extended beyond the pitch as he became a symbol of hope and inspiration, particularly in Africa, demonstrating that age is no barrier for success. Miller's legacy endures as one of Africa's greatest footballers, recognized for his talent, charisma, and contribution to the sport's global popularity. Wow. Now that is someone worth being proud. If there was ever a time when I say I'm from Cameroon, the word Roger Miller is always one that gets completely and utterly overwhelmed as a symbol of who, where, and what Cameroon represents. At the age of 38, he rose to prominence as the face of the World Cup. A face where, prior to that, Africans were not known to play the beautiful game in a technical way at the global stage with 90,000, 95,000 fans shouting their names again and again. Now, that is a story worth telling. But we will be focusing on specific things today, which, again, from a Molo Molo perspective, is quite important because who was Roger Miller? Or what are the technical things from a tech perspective that made him who he was? Now, let's recap what we just heard. Miller had retired. Roger Miller had retired. At age 36, like most footballers today, you look at your body, you look at just how much you've aged, you look at where your club is at, you look at what else can I do, you look at beyond with your kids, you look at all that equation, and you put all these parameters together and you make a decision. And that decision is not an easy one. That decision, I mean, I'm not a football player, okay? I've played a bit of football. I must say, let me digress a little bit because it's quite important to the story, just to give you some perspective how much football I've played. So I've played some church football, in my church, not church football. I played some football at church, and that was fun. To be fair, we had a lot of fun playing together and the camaraderie and really kind of bonding and really trying to be competitive in a godly way, if there's ever such a thing. But in any case, I have very fond memories of playing football at church. And one of the things that I remember, it's actually quite a funny story because I was playing, we were in the central region, as they call it, central in terms of central in Johannesburg, i.e., we were in the surroundings of the church within the surroundings of Johannesburg itself. And we had quite a formidable team. And I remember one time in the change rooms, we were basically changing, and there was, I'm not going to mention his name, if ever he watches this podcast or listens to it, I don't want him to be embarrassed for life. But there was this brother, as we call each other dearly, within the church, brothers, sisters. And this brother, he got undressed, right? So we all get undressed, and we try to keep a certain level of decorum, that you don't show too much, you don't reveal too much, and if you do reveal too much, you don't, just flash it around. In any case, there is a certain decorum when you do change. But this brother had a thong on, and I could not believe my eyes. A full blown thong. This was my first time seeing a thong, by the way. I was maybe 18, 19, right? Maybe 20. And here's this Christian guy. He's wearing a thong. And for the life of me, I just and he was dancing, right? So he was celebrating. I don't know whether we won or we were about to play, or I can't remember exactly. But he had a thong on, and I couldn't believe it. And this thong w- was wedged up the crack of his butt, and I was like, oh my word, what is this? And he was dancing, and his butt cheeks were moving, and I thought, oh my word, what is going on? And I couldn't get that image out of my head the whole game. But why am I telling the story? One is because it's funny to me, but two, because that's the kind of things that as you are about to retire, you have to think about. And I do believe, and in terms of memories, right? In terms of, the people that you're leaving behind, the memories, the funny things, the people who you're going to be no longer conversing with, the competitive nature that you are leaving behind. And Roger Miller, at age 36, had retired. He had hung his boots. He decided to leave his club in France and go back to Cameroon to retire. Now, as the story goes, Um, as age 36, age 37, he's already retired. There was a charity match, I think, at the end of his 36 or 37th year, and he played a charity match where, if I understand correctly, the president was attending and some of the dignitaries were there. I think it was Stade Olembe. I think, I'm not so sure. But in any case, he played, and the president, either because he saw it himself or he heard from other people, he was incredibly impressed. And he couldn't believe his eyes that this man, 36-year-old, supposedly long gone from his prime, was producing the kind of football that, in a way, if you were to think about the context of Cameroon, the context of what I've just read, of the facilities, of the level of technique, of the level of the attention to detail, Roger Milla, having played in France, was a head above the rest. He could see the ball before everybody, like how we speak about Lionel Messi, right? He's 5, 10 steps ahead of you before he reaches the ball. Before the ball gets to him, he already knows the third and fourth part that will happen way after he has passed the ball. That's who Roger Miller was, and that's in a sense what the president saw with respect to the other players, especially because Cameroon was already a force to be reckoned with, but had just lost the African Cup of Nations that year. And fundamentally, it was an embarrassment to the whole country. As it is today, here we are, 2024, Cameroon has literally been knocked out of the last 16. What an embarrassment for a country that is deemed a powerhouse in the African continent. But it was the same type of sentiment then. The president felt that they needed to be a centerpiece. They needed to be someone who has a certain level of charisma, who has a certain level of understanding of the game, that supposedly could find that all of that in this 36-year-old who had just retired, or actually at the time of the phone call, supposedly he had already been 2 years, 2 whole years in retirement. Wow. Now that is something to just think about. So what could have gone in the head of Roger Miller? What could have gone in his head that allowed him to think differently, to really want to come back and play? And there are some character traits that we can go through, the type of character traits that you need to have as a retiree to come back, to have a second chance, to go onto the stage. Fundamentally, he didn't do anything. He was part of the 1986 World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, and that didn't really go too well. And fundamentally, his presence, at least, was not really that important. But he was that important. I mean, he had some accolades of Roger Miller. If I remember correctly, he had won Footballer of the Year in 1976. So he played quite a pivotal role, especially in the African Cup of Nations. He was deemed to become part of the African Hall of Fame. I mean, this was a big deal. So him retiring was sad to most people, but more importantly, it was an empty void that was left behind for this important event that was coming up. Italy 1990. Now, where was I in Italy 1990? My dad reminded me when I spoke to him earlier today that we were actually had just already we were already 2 years back in Cameroon. As most of you know, I was born in Italy, specifically in Pesaro, and we had moved back to Italy. I mean, back to Cameroon in 88, 88 somewhere there, and of course, Italy 90 happened 2 years later. But there was still a keen interest in knowing what would happen, and let's just think about what I remember, and just to give you context of just how big of an event that was. Argentina off the world championship, becoming world champions with Diego Armando Maradona in 1986. were now playing Cameroon. I think this is Group B, and they were playing their first match. Mind you, Cameroon had now gotten a new coach from Ukraine, and I think I mentioned his name. He was very famous in Ukraine, or at least at the time I think it was still part of the USSR. But one thing that this coach obviously made very clear, the coach Valery Nepomniachtchi, that he didn't want Roger Milla. He felt that Roger Milla is old news. And I think he had a right to do so. They were in a state of rebuild with Omambik, Kanyabinik, other guys as well. It was a state of rebuild in many ways, and Roger Miller was old news. He was old news. He didn't belong. He didn't belong. And one thing that can be said is that it was the president of the country that had to fundamentally, um, in a way, just overstay and overreach his authority by mandating through a presidential decree that Roger Miller should not only participate but play at the Italy 1990 World Cup. Now, that is unprecedented. I don't remember ever. Then maybe somebody can help me in the comments below if there's ever been a country where the president, since 1990, of course, country where fundamentally the president had to give a presidential decree to mandate the Football Association to not only include this specific player, but to ensure that this player actually plays in a specific tournament. I don't remember any of that. So this was a big deal, but not only a big deal for Roger Miller, because he now, in a way, was kind of the teacher's pet, the teacher fundamentally being the president. And he came in as, in a way, washed out retiree coming back to somehow former glory, and with these bunch of guys who earned their way. Just remember, Roger Miller did not participate in any qualifiers. He did not participate in all the grueling work back then in 1990, not what it is now, where I think you have 5 teams, if not 4 teams, attending the the FIFA World Cup. I think back then it was 3, if I'm not mistaken. So imagine the whole continent having to travel to Cairo and travel to Nairobi and travel potentially down to Johannesburg and then go to Bamako, Mali, and go to Abidjan and go to Lagos. Fundamentally having to play and eventually qualify Algiers, go to Casablanca, Morocco. And Roger Miller did not participate. And I think a lot of people forget that. He did not participate. He had retired. He only came out retirement May 1990. Fundamentally, when does the most World Cups start? They start in June, July. He had almost no time for preparing. He has no time to figure out whether he's going to be part of what type of teammates will he have, who will he confide in, what type of system will they be playing in, how will they be playing, how they be using him. I mean, he was an attacking midfielder slash striker. How will they be playing him? So a lot of people forget that it's not the roses and the petals were not laid out for him. He was an outsider in that team. He was an outsider in that team. And that is quite interesting because when you think about what it means to have a second chance and what it means to prove your doubters wrong, this is one amazing story. But let's take a step back and try and figure out what made Roger Miller, and what were the things that we've come to love, and some of the character traits and personality traits that we believe helped him to definitely endure through the years. as he became into, in a way, football legend. So when you were to think about some of the things that he was incredibly good at as a tech champion, was if you were to take the football shoe, you may think, the football shoe. Yeah, the football shoe is not. Some of you have never played football. I get it. But the football shoe, unfortunately, I don't have a football shoe. Clearly, I don't play that much football anymore. But most of you have seen a football shoe, what it looks like. It doesn't look like a normal shoe. It's a shoe that essentially wraps around your foot. Unlike a basketball shoe and most shoes in general, that are worn casually, a football shoe or a soccer shoe, soccer boots or football boots wrap around your whole your foot. And the manufacturing process around that is often a mixture of hand stitching, of leather curing or lasting, as they call it, and a lot of under pressure gluing of different materials that fundamentally brings the strength, but also the suppleness required for you to be able to use this football shoe in most conditions, whether it's raining, whether it's ice, whether it is turf, or whether it's grass. And but the first time I remember wearing football shoes, the first time, a football shoe is not an easy thing to play with, mainly because you realize just how sensitive it becomes when you touch the football. It's and it was designed that way. It was designed to not to protect your feet, of course, so that everything's kind of tucked in and well protected. But it was also made sure that you had the sensitivity with the football, which means that you had to be a very astute student of a football boot. I remember very clearly is that, the first time you have a football boot on, whenever you kick a ball, it doesn't do what you want it to do at all. If you had used to play with normal running shoes or, just any other boots, once you wear a football shoe, what the ball does, what the football does when you touch it and when you kick it, especially when you're trying to do a shooting or a free kick or whatever the case may be, or even worse, a penalty shootout, doesn't the football doesn't do what you want it to do. So fundamentally, you had to become a student of the football boot. You had to become a student of what it means to have a boot that is slightly aged, what it means to have a boot that is slightly wet, what it means to have a boot where the ground is a bit too dry, or the grass is a bit too tall, or the football in itself is overpumped or is underpumped. What does it mean? But more importantly, you need to be more astute about the football shoe that you're wearing the older you get. Why? Because you no longer had a way to compensate through strength or speed, or you no longer had a way to compensate through, amazing dribbles. Now you had your mind and you had your feet, and your feet had your shoes, and your shoes needed to do everything that your mind and your feet were saying. More so at 38 years old. You can just imagine the amount of training and the amount of mental fitness and mental exercises and after hours that Roger Milla between May 1990 and June 1990, what he had to go through to regain that perception, regain that sense of understanding, regain that sense of what does it mean to be a football player again. It's just incredible to think about it. This is Cameroon 1990, and I've read the backdrop. He wasn't a multimillionaire at the time. To be fair, Soccer players were not multimillionaires in 1990s unless you played for, AC Milan, or you played for Real Madrid or Barcelona or Ajax or Man United, right? You played for the second division or first division, Liga, like Roger Milla played. He played for Montpellier and I think another team, I forgot. He wasn't extremely rich. So for sure he wasn't a multimillionaire with an amazing set of facilities back home in Cameroon. He had to do the grind back to where he should be in the facilities that were available for him in Cameroon. So the football boot was something that he took very seriously. And that's quite important because when you think about what it means to have a keen mind of wanting to really grow in your craft and wanting to really go deep in understanding how you can perform better, having this attention to detail is so important. But before we get to attention to detail, let's look at one other piece of technology that was now available for Roger Miller over the 1980s, late 70s and 1980s. And one of the things that for sure the coach brought, and of course he potentially also got to learn, is video analysis. What is video analysis? Video analysis technology is the technology that enables you as a sportsman or sports assistant or sports fraternity in general to study not only your team, because cameras are now focusing on different players, there are multiple cameras in a different match, right? Fundamentally, you will have five, six, seven, eight, sometimes 10 cameras looking at different ways, at different things. And video analysis is the collation of all those footages that will enable a decisive decision on a specific aspect. What am I saying? So fundamentally, if you were to look at how a player movement or how a team changes shape, for example, either your team or the opponent's team, how they change shape when they go attacking and how they change shape when they come defending, you will do that through video analysis. If you want to know how fit a player is when it comes to the 90th minute or the 20th minute, you will do that through video analysis. Why? Because you'll be able to track that player through the footage. If you want to be able to understand how, as a player, you can improve your positioning as a striker or as a defender or as a midfielder to receive the pass, or anticipate the movement of your opponent, or learn to anticipate the movement of your other um, player, you will do that all through video analysis. So all of a sudden, you had this amazing technology that, for the person who had the aptitude of collecting the information, understanding the information, disseminating the information, and allowing the information to guide him to make the right decision, he had the leverage over other players. At 38 years old, Roger Miller had what he needed to truly show the world that he was a force to be reckoned with. 38. Against, of course, he came as a cameo in Argentina, losing 1-0 to Cameroon. I remember, if most of you haven't seen it, it was, kind of the David and Goliath, a no-name team. I still remember the kits that the Cameroonians used to wear. It was like these, I mean, in general, all football players used to wear back then. It was these really short shorts, and it was like, these long socks, and you feel like they were actually wearing boxers more than shorts. But in any case, that's just me. And and that was an amazing match between Argentina and Cameroon. And the header of Oman Big, just, towering above the Argentinian defender and pulling it to the far side with his header, was just a stuff of beauty. And but why am I bringing this up? Because video analysis is a technology that fundamentally came to prominence in the 70s, of course, to the teams that had the money, but to teams like Cameroon and Egypt and all the other teams, it came much, much later, if not a decade and a bit later, where combined with the coach that understood it, Ukrainian coach Nepomniatsky fundamentally brought a different mindset for those who could accept it, for those who believed in it, for those who understood that this was important. The analysis from the 86 World Cup, the analysis of the Romanians, the video analysis of the Colombians that the Cameroonians played, the video analysis of the English that the Cameroonians played in the quarterfinals. That that was an amazing piece of tech that I believe Roger Miller took to heart. Now, if you were to think about the achievement of Roger Miller during that World Cup, he was, as I read in the insert, he had scored 4 goals, right? Scored 4 goals. All 4 goals were scored coming off as a substitute. Why? Again, from the backdrop. Old man, not really fitting in, not really sure. The coach slowly but surely warming up to him and figuring out that he can actually still use this old man. But yet the old man completely overreached and punched way above his weight to the mesmerizing world. How is this 38-year-old that we've hardly seen, we don't even remember where he played, and here he is competing with giants? And who are these giants he was competing with? Jürgen Klinsmann from Germany was played in Italy in 1990. I remember um, Salvatore Schillaci for Italy played. I remember Lothar Matthäus played in Italy 90. Of course, Diego Armando Maradona played. Um, who else played? Um, Franco Baresi, amazing defender, played in Italy 90. So many more players played in that World Cup that here was a little known Roger Miller who fundamentally outshone with his trickery, with his anticipation, with his strength, with his finesse, with his ability to finish, which was not a given back then. One of the things that most of you know, if those who have watched football and know, that was the biggest Achilles heel for most Africans up until the late 2000s. Africans were not poised in front of goal at all. We used to have heart attacks on an African team. I remember the amazing African teams of Cameroon or Ghana, Ghana playing 2010 World Cup. What a team. What a team that, brought I mean I was in South Africa 2010 and we went to most World Cups. Not most, I wouldn't say most. We went to quite a few World Cup games, and Ghana was such a mesmerizing team. So many good players, but the one thing that always was an Achilles heel for most African teams was their finishing in front of goal. And here he is in a 1990, little known 38-year-old, just came out of retirement a few months ago, scoring like someone who's been playing for Bayern Munich or Real Madrid or Manchester United or AC Milan at the time or Juventus, who was fundamentally not as scared to score goals and celebrate. He celebrated, he brought joy and laughter and an amazement for the beautiful game when he goes and scores and goes to the goalpost and does his shimmy little dance that basically shows Makossa, which is one of the dances and dances in Cameroon, that I am here. This is my chance and I've taken it. Now, if you were to really reflect on the story, if you were to really try and now bring it to fruition, and what does that mean for us? What does that mean for you and I? Of course, it's an amazing story of incredible pride, of incredible prowess and incredible understanding of the beautiful game, right? It is an incredible story, but there are lessons here for you and I, and for me, it's quite challenging to even think about it. I guess because I'm so close to the story. But let's think about one of the first lessons. How do you restart your career after a break? As a professional, how do you restart your career after a break? Now let's paint a scenario. This could apply to anybody. This could apply to a young mom or a professional who fundamentally had a career. She was gunning for it, and usually this applies to women more than men, where you had a career of 5, 10 years, you worked and you were progressing. And then there's a discussion about family between you and your husband. There's a discussion about kids. Do we want kids? Can we have kids? Should we have kids? And then eventually, through a bunch of discussions, potentially going to see doctors back and forth, you make a decision. But then the next question comes up. What type of parents do we want to be to this child? Do we want to be relying on, helpers and people who come home, we will come home to, and they'll take care of our kids? Or do we want to afford this child, given potential privilege that we have, the affordability that one of us will stay home and raise this child? Usually, this role falls on the woman. The woman then decides, I'm going to stay home and I'm going to raise this child to the detriment of my career. You raise the child 5, 10, 15 years potentially, and then you want to go back to the workplace. Let's just say 5, 10 years afterwards. How do you do that? How do you return to your old self? How do you let go of your old self and rebrand who you are now? What do you do? And the story of Roger Miller gives some clues and gives some aspects to that. The one thing that Roger Miller never did, he never backed down from believing in himself. He was an amazing, amazing example of what it means to believe in oneself, to cut out the noise, to believe that you are still worthy, that what you've learned hasn't gone away. What you've learned is still relevant, irrespective of how much technology has moved forward, irrespective of what type of programs people are using. Remember what if you some of you remember one of the things I mentioned about academic excellence. Academic excellence is your ability to learn and to apply consistently and repeatedly. That is also, in a way, the very arsenal that you will need to get back, and that is the ability and the willingness to learn, to say, I am willing to learn and I can learn. I have been able to teach a young human being how to learn. The values that I'm passing on to this human being is the very values that I can pass on to anybody else in this new work that I'll be doing. That is the confidence you need to be having. That is the confidence that I need to be having. I can take myself, for example. At some point in time, I had moved to Portugal, or should I say, I was unfortunate to be stuck in Portugal due to COVID, and now fundamentally I had a change of career. I had a change of career, but I also had a bit of a break. Given the COVID, I was 3 months, I would say, out of work. Okay, maybe it's a bad example because I was just 3 months, but the principle still applied. Why? Because I was moving to a new company. I was moving to a different world. I was moving to how people do engineering slightly different. Here I am. I have preconceived ideas of what German and German engineering is, and here I am coming from a South African background, and I am wondering, am I good enough? Can I do this? Will I be able to do this? And I had for a long time imposter syndrome, but I had to remember that I am worthy. I can learn again. I can do this again. I can apply myself and I can compete at the same level with the best again. And it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of when. When will I be given the opportunity to prove that I can? And when I am given that opportunity, I will make the best of it. So there are some of these pointers that indeed a break is just a break. What you can do with that break is bring and leverage the very things that you've learned during that break as not a negative because it's a gap, but as a positive because of the experience that you've learned through that break. Now, this leads me to the next question, which is how do you reach your full potential? It's it is such an amazing story, right? Roger Miller was in a way a nobody to most people around the world and became a legend who walked amongst legends of Klinsmann, Donadoni, Baresi, Schillaci, uh, you know, you know, just on and on and on. Armando Maradona, who fundamentally didn't achieve, didn't really feel his full potential prior to 1990. Because if he did, he probably would have been, if you think about someone who has fulfilled his full potential over a 15-year span, it's not that the potential changed over that 15-year span. He always had that potential. One good example is Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. Potential has always been there. In actual fact, the potential was seen since he was 9, 10. Now, can you say it was extraordinary potential that you couldn't miss? Sure, you can say that. But so can you say about the potential too of any other aspiring kid who wants to make it or who wants to showcase their potential in the bigger stage. And Roger Miller was that child who grew up in the dusty streets of Yaoundé and went to play in Douala and eventually to France, but yet really shown at the African stage that he was amazing. But yet he never really punched through the international stage of being known and being recognized as someone who has and can have an impact. So how do you leverage it up? How do you ensure that this potential at work, in your school, is really shown for everybody to see? One thing that you need is you need to a network. Roger Miller, through hook or through crook, I don't know the story. I don't know why the president of the country felt so strongly about him wanting to join the team to play in Italy in 1990. But the president of the country believed in him, and the president of the country had enough clout, enough authority to allow Roger Miller to come back into the national team. You need a network. Potential is just potential until someone sees it and believes it as much as you do. So, how do you succeed and how do you fulfill your full potential? You need to showcase. You need to be humble enough to show to as many people as you want. The only way Roger Miller got back into 1990 is if he decided to play in a charity match that he had no business playing in, if you were to think about it. I think it wasn't even his charity match, it was a charity match for someone else, where the president or some of the authorities attended. So if he felt that it was beneath him to play in such a charity match, I mean, here he is from France, African Player of the Year. He's won whatever he needed to win at domestic level. Why should I play in this charity match? But he did. And in so doing, he kept on showing and grow his network of people who are seeing him and watching him, even at a retired age, having fun and still showing that he can do it. So, to show your potential is not so much about people looking at you, but it's allowing your potential to serve all around you to the point where different people will see it for what it is, and the right connection will be made to propel you to a stage where you will be able to fulfill and showcase and have the right preparation meeting opportunity to indeed show the success that is validated through your potential. Potential is there for you to grab and to throw until it sticks. And that sticking is the connection that you have that will take it forward. So that is an incredible story, again, from Roger Miller. Um, the one thing that really got me challenged about the story was, how do you improve your attention to detail? That that is an interesting question, mainly because attention to detail is something that I'm not always good at. I must be very forthright. Even though you might be thinking, huh, that's interesting. I mean, you're an engineer, you've done a PhD and so forth, but I'm not naturally attentive to detail. I guess I could say I'm a typical boy, and I can see that in my son Samson. So we are cut from the same cloth in a way. I'm not naturally attentive to detail. I tend to miss a lot of things if I'm not careful. So how do you grow that? And whether it is at school, especially at school, right? You need to be attentive to the very things you need to be doing, whether it is a lab or whether it's a test or whether it's a exam prep. Um, you need to be attentive to the concepts that are being taught and to the things that you are revising. But also at work, how do you ensure that your report is mistake free? How do you ensure that what you have submitted is indeed to the right level of expectation? I don't really have an answer for this because I feel like I'm still learning. But I do think when I think of the story of Roger Miller, I think of leveraging the things that help you be more attentive. One of the things that helped him to really hone in on the very things that could could help him be the star that he became was the technology of video analysis and the technology of repetition and training and practicing. He fundamentally, I believe, and nutrition. I completely forgot about that, right? He definitely, Roger Miller, if you see him today, he's a student of food in terms of food science and what your body needs. And he has never looked obese almost his entire life. And he's, I think, over 70 now. And that comes from somewhere, is the realization that there are things that will help you. There are things that will amplify your ability to become more attentive. I never used to believe that sleep helps you to get ready for an exam. I always used to be the guy that studies right through. I remember in matric or whether it's first year, second year, and I will be actually take pride in knowing, like, yeah, I will, study the whole night, and man, I'll go right, and yeah, I was 19, 20, and in a way it worked, but I didn't retain any of the stuff I studied. Nothing, just, regurgitation, and then that's it. Write the exam, maybe pass, do a little bit well here and there, but the information was completely lost after the exam. Now, is that, I speak about it, is that academic excellence? No, it's not. It's completely the opposite. But it comes to attention to detail, it's knowing those things that leverages and that helps you to truly hone in on the things that matter. So when it's not, so my understanding of attention to detail is not about you being able to be attentive to everything, but it's you being attentive to the things that matter and focusing on your strong points while you are learning and leveraging your tools around you on the weak points. The strong points, you've got to zone them in. You've got to master them. You got to regurgitate, not regurgitate, but definitely make it part of your subconscious in a way that it can just come out. And the weak things is something that you need to use tools to consistently help you. Let's take an example. Now, if I were not very good at maths, or another example, if I'm not very good at keeping a story and understanding what happened in a story, i.e., reading. I'm very, very, very bad at reading, or at least remembering what I've read. The one thing that I will focus on is I know I'm very good at remembering the overall story, what it was all about, you know, kind of if you put it in pictures, I will remember it. Years down the line, I'll still remember what was drawn and why it was drawn this way, and I remember a little stick here and that. Is that then I will leverage that strong point and ensure that every single thing that I do that I deem important, I will draw and I will write. I will draw it out and figure out what makes sense to me. And this is the strong points that I consistently work on and make sure that I strengthen. The weak points, which is in the detail, right? Not everything can be drawn out to detail. Is then it's the fillers. The fillers, and these are the ones that you can now leverage through technology, things like repetition, flashcards, little notes, little sticky notes, and consistently do that until fundamentally it becomes also part of your subconscious. The more you do that, the more you amplify on your strong points and ensure that they are indeed something that you have got working properly for you and that it's repetitive and you can rely on, the easier it becomes to make the weak points more comfortable to regurgitate and to ensure that it becomes part of the process of you getting more attention and understanding the intricacies that you need to be doing, or whether it's for work or whether it's for preparation for studying for an exam. And I think that if you were to put it all together, when you talk about legacy, what is legacy? Legacy for me is the willingness to accept that you are gonna be no more. Is when you're 20, when you're 30, you don't really care too much. And in the way you don't really care, you can see it even in the workplace, right? If a colleague is in his 20s or early 30s, his mannerism or his thinking about, you know, tough decisions like marriage or kids or retrenchment or even pension is not really a big deal. To some, it is, but most, it's not. And a lot of these things are a reflection of your state of mind. You don't really think about what people think of you. You don't really think about what you want to leave behind. You don't really think about what you want to be remembered as. And so you are essentially all over the place. You're not always present. Your true character and your values are not always present. I believe that's what legacy is about. Legacy is about the conscious understanding of who you are, who you want to be, and who you are comfortable being in front of people. That's your legacy. And of course, legacy then amplifies in different ways, right? But it's fundamentally, it starts with you. It starts not with other people, what I want other people to see. What do I want to leave behind for other people? This and that. Legacy is about you. And that's what I believe. For example, I believe one of the things from a legacy perspective I've come to understand about me is that I am comfortable speaking about who I am and the things that I would like to achieve. I am comfortable speaking about the things that I've done wrong as much as I'm comfortable speaking about the things that I've done right. But more importantly, I am comfortable in spending time helping someone else reach their full potential, sometimes to the detriment of my own. And I'm not saying that is completely the picture of who I am as a legacy, but I'm comfortable being in that place. And that's something that you and I need to consistently think about. What it is that I'm comfortable in, What what just if I slip into this outfit, that is just me. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt today, proudly Cameroonian, and that's it's a bit tight to be fair, right? I mean, most of you might have noticed already, but it's about being comfortable. It's about being okay. It's about being not caring what people say, shutting out the noise and saying, this is who I am, and this is what I enjoy doing, and this is who I'm willing to show to the world that is me. And I'm okay with any judgment because fundamentally I enjoy doing and showing this version of me to the world. In my view, that is legacy. And the legacy of Roger Miller was someone who was fundamentally someone who has completely shattered the status quo, came from out of nowhere, out of retirement, from his peers' eyes, completely out of nowhere, and rose to his full potential that he always had, and did it with dignity, did it with joy, did it with happiness, and showed us that indeed it is possible to fulfill your potential. It is possible to create a legacy in an instant by showing people who you truly are at the time when everybody is watching. That is the story of Roger Miller from Cameroon, a tech champion in sports nutrition, in attention to detail, in understanding himself, in understanding what he wanted to achieve, but also in taking a chance in his second career in terms of a legend amongst legends. So that is Molo Molo. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something from this episode. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe wherever you're watching or seeing this video. I'm so thankful for everybody who has given me love over the last few weeks as this episodes have been coming out on a weekly basis. Thank you so much for your love. I am really touched by all the different comments and feedback that I've been getting. Stay tuned for more. Please subscribe as we'll be going through different types of topics, hopefully having some guests in the next coming weeks. So that's really exciting. But again, I just want to thank everybody. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and make sure that you hit the notification bell so that you're able to not miss out on any other episodes. This is Molo Molo, where we discover the African tech champions and innovators that are shaping the future of the African continent. I am Polan Kantwe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.